It's been nearly 13 years since refugees at a campsite in Burundi were targeted in a deadly attack. Armed militants stormed the Gatumba refugee camp on the night of August 13, 2004. The camp was home to hundreds of refugees. 166 people were killed on the night of the massacre, and dozens were left injured with nowhere to go. One of the survivors of that attack was a young woman named Sandra Uwiringiyimana. She shares her story in a new memoir called How Dare the Sun Rise? Memoirs of a War Child. And she co-authored the book with journalist Abigail Pesta. And both of the ladies are here with me now. I said this to you earlier. This should be required reading for every teenager in this country and beyond. The book is really good. It's really inspirational. And you start the book with this massacre. That's how you sort of introduce yourself. It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare experience. Why did you start there?
Because I realized that after the massacre, this was going to be a key part of who I am. I was going to live the rest of my life making sure that I share my story so that no one else ever has to go through this.
And you go from that nightmare and then back in time. And you describe what sounds like an ideal childhood, a home that's open, there's people coming in and out, it's very welcoming, you have great parents, you love school and you excel in school. And then there's this quote that really struck me. I knew the sounds of war before I knew how to do a cartwheel.
Yeah.
But you still seem to have a great childhood. How did you normalize that? You're hearing the sounds of war in the background.
I think for us, it was never like the world is ending. It was always, you know, there's good days and there's bad days, you know, and sometimes you went to bed with gunfire in the background, and other days you went home with a full house and laughter. And that's kind of what we were taught from a very young age. My parents made sure we understood that the world is not perfect and there are good and bad days, and you have to just take it all and still live your best life.
Abigail, I can see you sort of shaking your head. I mean, you obviously now you know this story very intimately. Did you know much about her story before?
Well, I first met Sandra when she was in high school, and she had done an art exhibit. She took photos of the survivors of the massacre who had made it to America, and they met on the anniversary of the massacre every year. And I just remember thinking when I first talked to her, oh my gosh, you know, this high school kid has been through so much, and here she is. She's plopped down in middle school in America, and she was just so wise and had such perspective. And I just thought, what was that like to come here after surviving what she had and then starting anew here and trying to figure out life in America? I was so impressed.
Yeah, because the thing about you and your story is there's probably like 10 things that have happened that are unbelievable. And if just one of them happened to one person, it would make an unbelievable, amazing life story. How did you help her compile this, put it in order, figure out a way to tell that story?
I would say it was such a journey, and we had so many heart-to-hearts and late-night talks. I mean, Sandra's in college, so and I'm a journalist. We had a lot of things going on, and especially for you to relive that. To, you know, there were things in the book you put in the book, you know, that Sandra hadn't even told her own family, and that's how personal it was. And I just remember you saying, "I want it to be authentic. I want it to be my authentic story. This is what it's really like," and that takes such guts to put your whole self in a book, put yourself out there. But so we really just talked through everything, you know, just the whole journey. And sort of, you know, it came full circle when we were thinking about how do we present it. And I'll let you talk about how, I just remember this night we were talking, I'll never forget it, and it was about your little sister who you lost, and how in the end you said this is a story for her, and this is the story I would tell her. It was just so moving.
Because in that massacre, though most of your family remarkably, miraculously made it out, your little sister did not.
Yeah. She was killed while my mother was holding her and on our way to escaping. And ever since then, I've kind of lived my life not believing that she was really gone. So when it came time to write this book, I knew that I just wanted to kind of update her on life since losing her, and I knew that I wanted to include every single detail that I could possibly tell her. And so this book is ultimately for her, but I hope that people can, you know, find points of connection and hopefully apply it to, you know, their neighbors and friends and new people that we're welcoming into this country.
Yeah, that is something that I found very interesting about this book, because obviously I've lived a very different life than you, but I did find a lot of points of connection. I am the child of immigrants like you, and there were a lot of things that are very American, experiences that are very American. I kind of like want to tease this a little bit so everybody knows, because it's the story of a refugee, a survivor of a massacre, who eventually is being interviewed by Charlie Rose and sitting next to Oprah Winfrey and introducing Angelina Jolie on stage. That's just the tease. But a lot of stuff happened in between. And I found myself, as I was going through this book, thinking, when is she going to see a therapist? When is she going to have a breakdown? When is she just going to stop and say, I give up?
I had many. Yeah, in the last chapters, when I started college, I had many breakdowns. And, you know, we don't have language to express that. So it completely drove a wedge between me and my parents, because I wasn't able to communicate that I needed help.
Yeah. You know, you talked about some of the stuff that you wrote about in the book, and you two talked together about. You hadn't talked to your family members about. Have they read this book?
Yeah, so I recently had to confront my parents about some of the experiences that I talk about in the book. And we just kind of sat down and talked, and their reaction was exactly as I had hoped it would be. But my mom's first reaction was, oh my goodness, are you not afraid that people are going to judge you? Because that's our world. We care so much about what everyone thinks. Like, our culture is very traditional, very close. So, you know, ladies aren't supposed to talk about things that make them look bad.
Right.
But ultimately, my parents were very supportive, and they just said, that's horrible, we wish we knew, and, you know, we support you, because they are my parents, and they love me more than they love the public. So
of course, they're always going to love you. And your mother's reading your perspective on the massacre. For your point of view, you watched her run out of the tent. You watched her holding your little sister. Had she heard your perspective before this book?
I think she'd heard, you know, like how I escaped, but she had never really heard about, you know, what I went through after the massacre. And I know that we were both experiencing it at the same time, but sometimes it felt like we were going through two completely different things. Like, she had just lost her child, and like, for me, most of my sadness came from thinking about what she must be feeling like, because I knew how broken I was, and I couldn't possibly imagine what my mother was going through.
I cannot say more about this book. You know, what are you hoping that people get out of this book? Why did you write this?
I wrote this so that hopefully we can all contribute to building a better world, but especially a better America for all of us. That you just don't know what your neighbor is going through, and to clear up some of the misconceptions about refugees and you know, about people who aren't from this country. You know, we come here and we become a part of the society, and we love being here, but we're also unique, and we have our stories, and, you know, we have a right to tell them. You know, it's telling our stories, all of us, that helps us live together better, you know? So I want everybody to go out and listen to each other's stories, and also tell your own stories, so that we can all understand each other better.
So I got to ask you this question before you leave. This is also the story of the refugee's journey. What happens once you arrive? How you're treated here, how you find your place in this new society. It's a host of new questions that pop up, especially when you don't speak the language. In light of that, you know, the current debate here in this country is about refugees, particularly refugees coming from war-torn countries. Should we allow more refugees in here from Syria and other places in the Middle East and places in Africa? They're coming from a background where war is all they know. Will they fit in this society? When you hear that sort of talk, what do you think?
When I hear it, I say, do you realize that you're speaking about another human in need of safety? Like, that's what it's about, you know. Forget the politics, forget what party you're speaking from, just remember that these are real people that we're talking about, with kids and with parents, with feelings. And if America hadn't taken me in, I have no idea where my life would be. And I know that that's the case for every single refugee out there. And so when we talk about this, just remember, and if you know one refugee that has impacted you in a positive way, just think of, you know, all the other hundreds of thousands of refugees that we could be helping. And if I look like a great person that you would like to live next to, then so does every refugee, you know? Yeah. So, like, to me, the book is about, you know, humanizing myself to the world, and part of doing that is also humanizing other refugees and saying, look, like, we're just like you, we have the same goals, we all want to succeed, we all want the best for our children, and that's what it's about. Just think about that when you're talking about refugees.
Sandra, Abigail, I could talk to you forever. There's your brother who was a child soldier, who was rescued. There's so many layers to this story. Thank you so much, ladies.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.